Hi everyone, and welcome to the Tesla Economist. I thought it would be remiss not to discuss this interview with Elon and Ron Barron. It's a great interview, I would recommend watching it, but I'm sure you already have. I'll discuss the elements that are relevant to Tesla. Ron mentions that Elon wants to make cars for $20,000 a piece, mainly referring to the new platform of vehicle that Elon mentioned on the latest earnings call that would cost half the price of a Model 3 to build. For the record, my maths has this closer to $15,000 cost rather than $20,000. Elon says they have not formally announced their next car program, so he can't go into specifics, but he says they do expect to make cars that are more affordable than the current Model 3 and Model Y. To give you some reference, currently the Model 3 in Shanghai is for sale at around $38,000. Some analysts are saying this even has a 32% margin, implying it costs around $25,000 to build currently, and this is, for lack of a better word, at least relative to how fast Tesla moves, old technology. Not only does it not have a front casting, but not even a rear casting, or in-house structural battery packs, which gives you some indication as to why I think the next platform will cost less than $20,000. But if we're already at $38,000 for an antiquated Model 3, then a $30,000 price tag for this new platform is probably reasonable. Bear in mind, we were initially told $25,000. I mean, if we want to be specific, he does say we expect to make cars that are more affordable than the current Model 3 or Y. He doesn't officially say for sale to consumers. So it may just be a robotaxi, but I would infer from the context that he is talking about for sale to consumers. Remember, the FSD profit will be significantly higher again than any gross margin on the sale of the car. And that is what we've been talking about lately, a part of Tesla's unlimited demand right there. A $30,000 car with perhaps a 50% margin, and then probably another 10% of that going to Tesla every year on FSD subscription. And like I've explained in the past, that the demand for a Tesla, or any electric car actually, reducing in price becomes exponentially more elastic due to fixed costs of the competition when it comes to gas and servicing. Just as a rough example, a $50,000 Tesla may compare to a similar cost of ownership of a $30,000 ICE car, but a $30,000 Tesla compares to more like a $5,000 ICE car. Now think how many more people can afford a $5,000 ICE car than a $30,000 ICE car. Yet Tesla only dropped their price by 40%, yet the cost of equivalent ownership has dropped 83%. Elon then goes on to talk about how big a factory Autonomy is, which he has mentioned many times before, because it's such a big deal. Elon says instead of a car driving about 10 to 12 hours a week, they could instead drive for 50 to 60 hours. Again, the fivefold increase in utility that he said many times before, and that we need fewer parking lots and fewer cars in general, so it's better for the environment. Elon says that Tesla is probably the best at auto manufacturing, which no one was expecting. Elon sounds like he is being modest here when he says this, and as a result, Ron interjects and says, probably in the history of the world, right? Presumably including all manufacturing ever, and Elon again modestly agrees. His modesty seems sincere, as in he doesn't want to brag about it, but equally he's not going to lie about it either, and admits that Tesla are that good. Then he talks about how you need to make the requirements and specifications of manufacturing less dumb, and to try and delete parts and processes. Elon talks about how they found parts and processes that were in there for just-in-case purposes, or even by accident, and now they're going through and removing them all. He also gives some examples. And they have deleted so many parts from the car. I don't think the competition are doing this. This is also one of the major advantages of a Tesla car. Now, I get a lot of comments about how Tesla need a new design, or their design looks old or dated, but think what happens when you have the same design for a decade, or even decades, and how you can refine the manufacturing process over that time, especially when you are continually looking for ways to improve it and reduce steps and parts, compared to other manufacturers who will make a new version of this car every 5 years or so. It's not feasible for them to continually refine the steps. Oh, and for the record, Teslas do not look dated. They're timeless design. Obviously, the more parts and processes Tesla remove, the costs reduce, the manufacturing becomes simpler, and the production speed increases. Elon talks about why he was sleeping on the floor in the factory. A lot of it was due to simply motivating employees, So the workers could see that the CEO was so motivated and hard-working that he'll sleep on the factory floor. Then they'll simply work that much harder. And this is through the really tough times getting to volume production. Then the workers give it their all. It was good leadership. Could you imagine Mary Barra sleeping on the factory floor? All right, lots of great conversation goes on about Twitter and SpaceX, and I might do a video on Twitter sometime too, but let's focus on Tesla. Ron talks about logistics, but starts by saying Tesla is making 40,000 cars a week. Elon then confirms that he thinks he has said publicly that their aspiration is to reach 40,000 cars a week by the end of the year, which I'm not entirely sure he has literally said, but perhaps in other ways. Either way, that is some easy math. It equates to 2.1 million a year run rate. Well, guess what, people? If we hit 1.4 million this year, then 2.1 million is 50% more. In other words, if Tesla do no expansion or ramping and remain at their current rate the whole of 2023, then they'll still hit 50% production growth. Yet there are analysts and fund managers out there, even some of which Tesla is their largest position, who are saying that Tesla will do 2 million next year. I don't say this to point out how bad these people's math are. I just like to point out and reduce the credibility from the authoritative people in the community, as they distort investors and the market's valuation on Tesla from the true value and expectations. Ron then says that 40,000 a week is producing a car every 15 seconds. Elon then nods his head as if he is quickly working out if what Ron said was true, and then agrees. Possibly Elon just worked out the equation of 7 days times 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds divided by 40,000 in his head. And yes, the answer was indeed 15 seconds. And this is while Elon is also very tired and jet-lagged in the interview. So, in case you didn't already work it out, assuming no black swan events or any major catastrophes, Tesla will certainly beat 50% growth in 2023. The market is not even priced in 50%. On top of that, the market has not priced in Tesla's operating leverage. The stock still seems very undervalued. But the next stage of growth is mainly dependent on 4680 sales, in case I haven't said that lately. Then we talk about logistics and that Tesla are simply getting too big and there are not enough ships or modes of transport available. So instead, they will smooth out deliveries throughout the quarter, which will actually reduce cost. Ron talks about autonomous trucks for deliveries, and is that the idea? And Elon agrees. Right, remember those 50,000 semi-trucks for 2024? Well, think how many of them might be used to deliver Teslas around the country. Then Elon says if you're even in the area, then the car will just drive to you. Something I've said in the past too. They talk about the fact that a US car company has a very small chance of survival and that Tesla struggled to get suppliers as a result and ended up having to do a lot of these processes themselves and were just simply forced into vertical integration as a result. Suppliers wouldn't take them seriously. This has now become an asset as Tesla had to understand the entire supply chain, and as a result, Tesla could design a more integrated vehicle that needed far fewer parts, cost less, weighs less, has increased performance, again, going to be so tough for the competition. Elon now says that Tesla may actually need to get into the mining business, and it is looking more likely that this will be the case. In the past, Elon has only said Tesla will if they need to. Well, it's starting to look like they need to. Perhaps this is a good sign and means that they are going to be bigger than they thought and will thus need more minerals. He also says Tesla will get into refining too, of which we knew already, and going to start lithium refinery in Texas soon. We then get some audience questions, and one of the questions is why should people invest in Tesla with a 70 times earnings ratio compared to Mercedes at 6 times earnings, which also sells EVs? Elon says he's not telling people to invest in Tesla and has said in the past that the price is too high, or not to invest in Tesla if you can't handle the volatility. At this stage, a higher share price is of little consequence to Tesla. In fact, lower is better if they're doing a buyback. Elon thinks that this is due to the fact that Tesla is so far ahead in autonomy and no one is even close. Yep, that's what I've said. Tesla will have this monopoly for probably at least a decade. But let's be realistic here. Mercedes' last 4 quarters likely have similar earnings, whereas Tesla, despite being 70 times earnings, is actually only about 25 earnings when you compare it to the level they are today at around 40,000 cars a week. Mercedes do not make profitable EVs. Tesla make very profitable ones. And all the other advantages Tesla have over EVs compared to anyone else. It seems people still don't quite understand yet just how difficult EVs are to make. But the mind-blowing part of Elon's answer is when he talks about a self-driving car costing the same to build, but becoming 5 times more useful. Then imagine what would happen if a company was doing 25 to 30% gross margins and suddenly that same thing was 5 times more valuable. What would that do to the value of Tesla and the car? Now, there are a few ways to interpret this and do math around this, but let's just use a simple way. If a Tesla is worth $50,000 and then it's worth 5 times as much, i.e. $250,000, but still only costs $35,000 to build in both scenarios, the profit or value goes from $15,000 gross profit to essentially $215,000, or 14 times as much profit or value. I think this is roughly the mind-blowing aspect of what Elon talks about, the value of autonomy. Also, remember, all Teslas already have this necessary hardware for this. And then there's Optimus on top of that, which is also hard to comprehend. I.e., a P ratio of 70 is justified due to the unbelievable potential. There's another question, then Elon is asked about the streetlights being a potential source of charging due to the infrastructure. I was happy to hear that Elon did already know about this, and I'd seen articles of this being used in the UK. It's good to see Elon is aware of everything going on in the industry. But basically, the supercharger stations will be self-sustained with solar and batteries, and will even work in a zombie apocalypse. Elon has a great sense of humour. Anyway, it's always great to hear Elon share some of his thoughts. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.